Inshallah ta'ala, everyone is doing well. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even through all these difficulties, has made it possible for us to still gather and benefit from each other. And and you still remember him in our virtual group that we've been doing it for a couple of weeks now. We apologize for starting a little late. Just trying to get all the technical things settled to make sure that we have a smooth class, inshallah ta'ala. So I hope you all could hear me. If you can, you could put a 1 in the chat box so I know that everything is good to go. I'm going to move my mic a little bit closer to me. I think I should be pretty loud. Normally, I am pretty loud in general. Don't use that against me in the future. But okay, alhamdulillah, awesome. Very good. I got a couple. Yeah, you can't talk. Oh, sorry. Other people, yeah. So you won't be able to talk or use your video. Obviously, there's no really need for that. But if you do have a question, you can just put it in the chat box, and inshallah ta'ala, I will be able to see that and try to answer to my best of my ability. Just a review from last week. We went over the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. That's what we ended with, and that was in the 6th year after Hijrah. And we kind of abruptly ended where we talked about the Prophet ﷺ made this treaty with the Quraysh for 10 years. They will not fight each other. And there was other items on that treaty, but that was the main one. And then maybe the second one that was really important is that whoever wants to join the Muslims, any Arab tribe, right, like the Garden Grove tribe, if they want to join the Muslims, then they can. And if somebody who wants to join the Quraysh tribe, then they can. So if Anaheim wants to join the Quraysh and Garden Grove wants to join the Muslims and Fullerton wants to join that, then they're all open to do that. And they have to apply by the same treaty. Okay, that's the key thing. And you're going to see how that's going to become super important. And then we talked about one of the last slides that we spoke about before we ended was that the Prophet ﷺ, now he has this treaty. He doesn't have to worry about the Quraysh sneaking up on them and try to attack them. He still has 2 other, enemies out there. The Jews are still plotting and planning against him. And then you have the Arab Bedouin tribes that are out in the desert that are just constantly causing havoc and issues with the Prophet ﷺ. So he has to be aware of them. Now the Prophet ﷺ, as he has some type of ease from the Quraysh, sent different letters to different kings. So to the Byzantine Empire, he sent a letter where their leader at that time, the Caesar at that time, his name was Heraclius, and he read the letter, and he didn't accept the letter. He just just acknowledged it and kindly did not want to embrace Islam. Same thing with a bunch other type of leaders, and we talked about the king of Egypt did the same thing, and he sent a servant woman to the Prophet ﷺ, which the Prophet ﷺ ended up marrying. I mean, it's a weird system how that happens. I know it's kind of that won't happen today. If there's agreement between China and America, China doesn't send over like a servant lady or somebody, right? But these are how things were at that time. And so the Prophet ﷺ accepted her, took her as his wife, and she bore a child from the Prophet ﷺ. It's really rare. All the other wives really didn't have any children from the Prophet ﷺ, except Khadija radiallahu anha, and the boy's name was Ibrahim, his son, and he passed away at the age a year and a half, as it's mentioned, right? 18 months, and the Prophet ﷺ wept tremendously about concerning that. And those who have small kids, I have right now maybe a 20-month-old one now. She's maybe 21. You're forgetting, but anyhow. And you know how dear children are, subhanAllah, at that age. They're really cute. They're, talking and so forth. And I'm trying to get you in the personal life of the Prophet ﷺ. He has to deal with that. And he was crying a lot when he passed away. And people came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "You, Rasulullah, you're crying?" And he said, "Yes, these tears are from what Allah has instilled in our heart from the mercy that we have with each other. There's nothing wrong with crying upon death. I'm trying to be macho, if you will." Okay, and so that's what we talked about. And the one thing I wanted to mention is that the Prophet ﷺ sent a letter to the Persian king at that time, Kisra, and that Persian king, he did something different. He took the letter and he ripped it up, and he said, like, how dare he your prophet tries to talk to me and tell me that I need to embrace his religion. And when the Prophet ﷺ heard that news, he said, may their kingdom be ripped up. And we'll see that the Persian Empire will come to a fall in the years when Umar radiallahu anh is the Khalifa. Excuse me. And so that's what we kind of ended on. Today, I'm going to try to do some Superman type tactics and see if I could get through about 3 main events that happened in the Prophet's life. I don't think I will be able to, but I'm going to try. And then and see, inshallah ta'ala, how we could hopefully speed up, as this will be the penultimate class before we end next week, inshallah ta'ala. And if you don't know what the word penultimate means, you can look it up later on. Those who know, you could put in the chat, and let me see if you know what the word penultimate means. Really British term. And so we only have one more class left from next week for the start of Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala. So we want to finish up by next week. So what we have in the 7th year, I'm going to skip a little about the little incidents that happened between the major events because of the sake of time. In the 7th year, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was in the 6th year. So now we're in the 7th year. And the Prophet ﷺ turned his attention to the Jews that were still plotting against him. Right? As I mentioned, didn't have to really worry about the Quraysh because of the treaty that they had with them. But the Jews, if you remember that were the living in Medina, many of those tribes moved out of Medina because not moved out, they were evicted from Medina because of what we already discussed and studied in previous sessions. And then they went north to this place called Khaybar. And Khaybar was a town, a village area that was very fertile in its soil, had a lot of date palm groves and other farming that the Jews benefited from. And so they set up shop there. They built their fortresses, and that was their hotbed or their headquarters. And so it's from there that they kind of started instigated, if you remember, the Battle of the Trench, where their leader, Huyay bin Akhtab, and others went to Mecca and told the Quraysh, hey, let's gather some people to attack Medina. And that's how the Battle of the Trench Battle of the Trench commenced, if you will. So the Prophet knew that they're always plotting against him, and they always have something up their sleeve, and there's always news that they might be attacking Medina. So this was, like I mentioned here on the slide here, is around 60 to 80 miles north of Medina. So it's not extremely far, but not extremely close either. And so the Prophet ﷺ knew that they were plotting, so he decided to try to get an army to go and to attack them first. And I put the second point here on this slide. This is one of the first ever kind of a preemptive attack that the Prophet ﷺ engaged in himself, where he goes into their town and gets them before they're even has an army prepared, right? Almost like a surprise attack, okay? And so the Prophet ﷺ says, only the people that was with me during the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which is around 1400, as we mentioned in the first point, will be allowed to go with me to Khaybar. And so Abdullah ibn Ubay was one of those people that didn't go to Khaybar. Didn't go to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, and other hypocrites. And they're saying, hey, we want to come to Khaybar. We want to go to this battle. Now, why would Abdullah ibn Ubay, the head of the hypocrites, want to come to the battle? Well, one thing is that they know Khaybar was rich in produce and wealth, and the Jews had a lot of money and other weapons and gold and silver, etc., in their forts. So if the Muslims would take over their forts and their land, it will be a tremendous amount of wealth. And we don't really focus on this, but a warrior or a soldier in the Muslim army at that time, they will look for benefit in that. Of course, they're fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're fighting to end injustice and end oppression, definitely, and protect the Muslims. But that is also something that they benefited from. Okay, one thing you have to understand that that during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was not a stipend given to each person in the army. Right, there wasn't like an army that you enlist in. If you're a man, you're just part of the army. That's what men do. Back in those days, you're just known that you should go and defend your town or your city. There's not a sign up for the army or the navy or the air force or anything like that. It's just that you just go and you defend. And so and that's how they will get repaid and help support themselves, as they will leave their work and their families. Today, if you join the U.S. Army or Air Force, there's something called a GI Bill. I kind of mentioned this before, that you get paid. No one's really there in the Army just straight volunteering. Maybe there's some, Allahu Alam, but they will re-encompass you with some type of whether money for college or other things, free schooling, that if you join the Army and be part of their forces, right? So this is how people wanted to benefit from. And so a lot of people wanted to go to Khaybar, but the Prophet ﷺ said only the ones that went the Treaty Hudaybiyah will be the ones that will go out with me. So the Prophet ﷺ tried to go really fast and tried to surprise them. And Abdullah ibn Ubay, as usual, causing mischief, right? A thorn, in the back of the Muslims here, goes and informs the Jews that, hey, the Prophet ﷺ is coming, and they're coming with an army, and they're going to attack you. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ tried to beat out his messenger and try to get there faster as they can. As they would even march during the nighttime, which is something that they rarely do, because out in the desert, if the moon's not totally full, it's pretty much pitch dark. And so they got there as fast as they can, and they surprised the Jews in the morning. As the Jews came out to do their work and do their farming, they came out in the morning and they saw a big army there, and they all just ran back into their forts. Remember, they all had forts, if you remember. And the Muslims are here, and they started in a state of panic, locked up their doors, and they stayed there. Now, Khaybar was very interesting in terms of a battleground, right? This is one of the first times you ever see the Muslim army going to a town and attacking. They're not in like the open desert, and they meet an army out in a roadway or out in the desert somehow. But this is now you're attacking someone's city. And so Khaybar was broken up into different forts. Husun, we say in Arabic. And so these Husun, these forts, it were split up here, and as mentioned, there were about 8 of them. And I give a little picture here. These are pictures you're seeing right now on your screen from this, on the PowerPoint, are the forts that supposedly that were the ones that the Jews used at the times of the Prophet ﷺ, that are still standing right now in Khaybar in present-day Saudi Arabia. You could take a trip if you go to Umrah and go visit Khaybar. It'd be obviously a little bit of a ride to get there. And most people don't, because it's not that close in proximity. But this you can see, especially the upper picture, how it's more on a mount. So if you're an army coming from the bottom and you see all the palm trees there, Allahu Alam if it was exactly like this, 1400 years ago. Obviously, we have to take it with a little bit of grain of salt, that they're up on a hill, so their archers could just shoot down. It'll be very hard for you to come up without having a shield and other things. This is the warfare that they had to use or had to deal with at that time. So they had all these different forts, and all of them kind of look like this, had a wall around it. They're living all together, and so you had to go and conquer one after the other. So the Prophet ﷺ made sincere dua always, right? Praying, not just going and fighting, kind of reminding the soldiers, what are you doing, right? What is our purpose of our fight here, right? And giving God consciousness and their iman and their faith of what they're participating in, right? And alhamdulillah, like I said, that is the best encouragement than money or some type of anything else, right? That they understand the hereafter and what they're about to confront. And so the Muslims took on the first fort. It's called Na'im, and every fort, honestly, I'm going to summarize, was like almost a 3 to 4 day siege, right? The Jews rarely came out, just like the story of Medina that we mentioned, that they rarely came out and fought. And so Ali radiallahu anh, in this story here, the first fort, he took on one of their main warriors and defeated him. And then the Muslims rushed in. They used to have these battering rams that will break down the door, and then they will just rush in. And usually with the Jews, what they would do is they will flee onto the next fort and lock themselves in. And the Muslims will go again, lay siege to the second fort for 3 to 4 days, and then break down the door. The Jews will go on to the next fort. And you have the same story if you really read the details of this battle over and over again. And that's what they did. And every fort that they conquered, the Muslims would go ahead and take the wealth of that fort and all the things that were in there, and they split it up accordingly to the rules that I mentioned in the Quran, right? And so here is, let me get to the next slide there. So then finally, when they got to the very last fort, the Jews kind of knew that this was end game for them. And so they finally said, we want to have a peace treaty with you, okay? Don't have to lay siege to us. We kind of know what our faith is. And so they said, okay, the Prophet ﷺ, once again from his mercy, right? And also this, if someone asks for peace, then you give it to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, fight them, but if they ask for peace, then give it to them, okay? And this is like, that's the way it goes. You don't say, oh no, they don't deserve it. It's over. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this in Surah Baqarah, verse 193 and 194, around there. We're talking about the verses of fighting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if they fight you and they ask for peace, then, give them that peace and give them that accord. And always invite them to Islam. So that's what the Muslims would do every single time. Invite them to Islam. Mostly all the tribes will deny it, and it will end up in a battle. And so they ask for some type of peace agreement. You're probably saying, no, not again, because they're going to set up shop somewhere else and they're going to come back and fight the Muslims, right? And we see that's the reason why we're in Khaybar now, because they were released in Medina, and now they set up shop here, and now we're going to let them go out again, right? But this is the way, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe some people hearts will turn to see this of how the Muslims treat warfare, and if maybe a lot of them won't, and they'll just go back to their same ways, right? But nonetheless, the message has been received from them. And so they made the agreement where that they will leave all their belongings. So imagine, these are like their home village. Imagine all the things that are there, from food, from shields, from weapons, from jewelry, from gold, silver, furniture, right? Everything you could think about. And that's why the Muslims gained so much wealth. And I put it there as a fourth point on the slide here, that they have never received ever before. Aisha radiallahu anha, after this battle, says that we were able to eat in our households more than we have never ate before, right? Finally, after, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been a prophet for almost 20 years now. Finally, they could actually mention that some of the Muslims were able to pay back money to people that they never, that they had debt, and the Muslim state was financed in a much better way. The daughter of Huyay bin Akhtab, her name was Safiya, right? This is a Jewish lady, was presented to the Prophet ﷺ as to take her as his wife. And this is like it's very strange for us once again to understand this, but this is how it was back in the day, that if a Muslim army, or any army, would fight another village or another group, and they will defeat them, usually the wife of their leader will end up the winning tribe or army. Their military general or their leader will end up marrying the wife of the conquered army, and that's just the way it goes. But here is a daughter of Safiya. This is the daughter of their leader. Her name was Safiya, radiallahu anha, ended up being the Prophet's wife, and so the Prophet ended up marrying her. And there's a point here about why does this happen for? You might think, oh, it's kind of like she's against her will. You're forcing women into these type of things. Doesn't look like very Islamic. One thing is that if you read the story, she actually, if you read her story very much, she really never liked her father. She knew that her father was very evil, and she heard about the Muslims, and she had an inclination towards them. And she actually became Muslim, and she wanted to join the Muslims, and then was presented to the Prophet for marriage, right? She wasn't forced in it, and she obviously gladly accepted. And this is another way that the Prophet would join relations with different tribes, right? If now you marry someone, the daughter of the leader of that tribe, right? And those other people now like, well, hold on, that's our cousin now that's married to this leader that was fighting us, right? It sets a different tone. You have in-laws now that you just fought, that now you have to kind of hold on, try to have better relations. So there's a lot of wisdom behind it. It's like a little bit of political type emphasis on that. That and also as another point is that the Prophet ﷺ, as marrying these people from different tribes, also shows the universality of Islam, that he's marrying someone that is from the Jewish background, like she's a Jewish woman, right? And to show that obviously she converted to Islam, but that they have this connection with other than Arabs, right? And it showed that this is not something that we're just an Arab thing, if you will, and show the universality of Islam and connecting these bonds of humanity together. So that's part of some of the points there. Just want to mention there. What do I have here? And the third point there is that the Jews are requested that they work the fields, because that was their fields. They know their fields very well, and they could work the fields, and as a salary, they will take half the produce, and the Muslim, you take the other half. And so you might think about, why would the Prophet even do that? But the Prophet accepted that. And one thing is easier, so he uses them as workers, right? And they're getting income from that, almost like a business, if you think about it, right? So it's a whole nother mentality here as a leader. And so the Muslims are making money off of this, and they have free labor, pretty much. I mean, to an extent, free labor. They're taking home half the produce, and so that's what the Prophet agreed to. And it wasn't the whole tribe. Obviously, only a number of workers will stay there and work the fields, etc. And so in this battle here, around 16 to 18, only Muslims were martyred. Very small number out of 1,400 people, and 93 Jews were killed. Right. Of course, it could be other people that were wounded from both sides are not mentioned. So this is the conquest of Khaybar. This kind of ended the Jewish attacks now in the Arab Peninsula. There was other surrounding Jewish tribes, and it's mentioned in the books that the Prophet went to each one of them afterwards, right? And the same thing happened where they laid siege to the other smaller areas and took over that. And so, and once again, these are people that were also plotting against the Prophet. He wasn't just going there for fun. And ended kind of like that Jewish, the Jewish attack that was constantly there, and an annoyance to the Prophet and the Muslims in Medina. So finally, it's kind of a not a really a big issue now with them, even though they moved. A lot of them moved out back to the Palestine type areas and other places, and they set up shop there and other places where they went. But you can see that later on that'll end up causing another issue later on. So that's a battle of a conquest of Khaybar, and hopefully, inshallah, if you guys had any questions on that, you can go ahead and put it in the chat here. Didn't Sophia ask to leave her father and exchange profit proposed to her? Asked to leave her father. Yeah, she would definitely wanted to leave her father. I kind of mentioned that a little bit. And then didn't really want to be with her father, and kind of like mentioned that he was not of the best of character of people. So yes, definitely, she had an inclination to Islam in the first place. It wasn't something that she was forced into, which understood. And so anyhow, good, alhamdulillah. So now we're going to move on to this, still in the 7th year now, this Umrah, or the minor pilgrimage. You could maybe translate it into English. One thing, remember, after the Treaty Hudaybiyah, one of the points was that the Muslims have to come back 1 year later. They can't make Umrah now. You guys have to come back 1 year later. And remember, the Muslims at that time were kind of upset about this. They already had the ihram on. They traveled from Medina, like, hey, we want to make Umrah. And the Prophet signed this agreement that to come back next year. And remember, they didn't really like that point. But now 1 year has passed. And so the Prophet ﷺ gathers these individuals, these 1,400 individuals, and added anyone else who wants to make Umrah. And the total was around 2,000, and headed towards Mecca once again. Now, this is kind of a tense situation, because now they're going back into Mecca. And remember, the agreement was that you can't bring large weapons, right? It's kind of like, why would you even put that as a point in the treaty? It almost sounds like you want to attack us and set us up to being, ambushed. And once again, the Prophet signs this. So what happened is that they had left 200 people on the outskirts of Mecca. They didn't enter the city, but they had all the weapons. The Muslims, they obviously have to be smart. The Prophet, mashallah, is like I said, he wasn't trained in warfare, but obviously he's guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he obviously puts all these safety precautions out there to protect his ummah, his community. And so these 200 people stay outside the city. They have all the weapons, and in case anything goes down, they're going to rush in and hopefully be able to help or defend off any ambush from the Quraysh. So the Muslims come in, right? 1,800 of them come in, right, with not much any type of armor or armor or weapons. And it's kind of a tense situation. We're going to make Umrah. If you guys don't know, Umrah pretty much consists of going around the Kaaba 7 times and walking between Safa and Marwa, these two hills, 7 times. Each way you walk is 1 time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then trimming your hair or cutting your hair, or shaving your hair, I should say. And that is pretty much Umrah. You can get it done, quite fast, if you will. Okay. And so the Muslims go and they make tawaf. Tawaf is going around the Kaaba, if you will. And the Prophet ﷺ orders them to jog swiftly around the Kaaba. This is for the men only. And this is called Rami in Arabic. And so it told them to do that, jog a little bit around it, the first 3 rounds. You have to do 7 rounds, right? You do 7 rounds, but the first 3 go around it quickly. Now, why did the Prophet ﷺ do that? Because the Quraysh, they all left, and they're all watching the Muslims like, oh my God, I can't believe these people are in our city, right? These are our arch enemies, right? This is a disgrace, but this is a treaty. So they all stayed back and watched them. And when they saw them jogging after traveling all the way from Medina, they were like, wow, who are these people? How much energy do they have? How much enthusiasm and strength they have. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ ordered that. So today, if you ever go to Mecca and you see people jogging, like at least walking really fast, some people do a little, run walk, if you will, around the Kaaba. That's what they're doing. They're fulfilling the sunnah. That men are encouraged to do it in the first 3 rounds when they make tawaf. Usually it's so jam-packed, it's hard to kind of do that without causing annoyance to people and hitting people and so forth. But if you ever see that, this is why people are doing it. They're not trying to win a race or anything like that. But anyhow, so the Muslims go ahead, they do their Umrah, they finish it off, and then they go home, alhamdulillah, and they fulfill this. And if you think that's such a big enjoyment to them, that they haven't seen Mecca, inside Mecca, for a very, very, very long time, right? And this is the first Umrah that the Prophet ﷺ ever performed, outside living in Mecca, if you will. But it's something that he never really did before. Okay. And you have to remember, at this time, there was idols all in the Kaaba. And so it's kind of an awkward thing, right? We're going to see, obviously, that's going to change pretty soon. And just a little fun fact, the Prophet ﷺ only made 1 Umrah in his life, and that's this one here. And only made one Hajj in his life. And that's going to come up later on in next week's lecture, if you will. And I need to go back on the Umrah thing. I'm doubting myself right now. I believe there's only 1, but I think some people say 3. I need to go back on that, so don't take my word on that yet, inshallah ta'ala. Moving on, we're going to go to the 8th year. 8th year, I tell you, we're speeding up a little bit. And I apologize for the hasting through things. But we're trying to make a deadline for next week, inshallah ta'ala, that we could finish on time. In the 8th year, there's this famous battle of Mu'tah. Okay. And what happened in this year, once again, there's a treaty still going on with the Quraysh. Now the Jews are not really a big concern anymore. The desert Arabs around Medina, these small little tribes, like nomadic tribes, are still an issue, right? As they are still jealous of Muslim power and they don't want to see them succeed, etc. And so the Prophet ﷺ obviously is trying to expand outside Arabia. Islam is a universal religion, right? It's not an Arab thing. Okay, it has to start somewhere, obviously locally first. So it sounds very Arabish. That's why you have to pick the Arab language, and a lot of things are obviously in Arabic for a reason, right? But it's a universal religion. Well, obviously, we keep things in Arabic in our prayer and so forth for a certain reason, to keep the meaning, and not to have that loss. And that's a whole nother discussion. So the Prophet ﷺ once again sends out letters to different kings and different rulers. And so he sends a message to the governor of Busra, which is in the Byzantine Empire, in the Roman Empire, once again calling him to Islam, explaining who he is, right? And to see the type of relations. Now, to send a letter to the Roman Empire is something amazing. This is like a super power, okay? But the Prophet ﷺ is not going to say like, oh, well, they're not going to listen to me. Like, no, this is it. I'm a prophet. I have to deliver this message. And so he's going to do that, right? There's no shame, no awkwardness in that. So he sends a messenger out to Busra. And on the way there is a tribe called Ghassan, right? And Ghassan is an Arab tribe, but they're on the border of the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire. And so they have really good relations with the Romans, okay? And so as this messenger is going, the leader of the Ghassan tribe stops him. Say, who are you? And he explains who he is, and he ends up killing the messenger, the Muslim messenger, okay? And obviously this is like a big no-no. It's understood by everyone. You don't kill messengers. If you don't like the group that the messenger came from, you take their letter and you could do what you want with it, but you leave the messenger alone and you send him back. It's kind of like understood etiquettes of any nation, if you will. Okay. So when you kill a messenger, it's kind of like, oh, you just did a big act of war now. Like that's a big no-no. And he knew that. And so he killed them. And so the Prophet ﷺ orders an army of 3,000 people, okay, which is quite large compared to other previous battles, right? And did something he never did before. He appoints 3 leaders to the Muslim army. Number 1, Zayd bin Haritha, radiallahu anh, was the Zayd that we all know that grew up in the household of the Prophet ﷺ as a little boy, as a servant of Khadija. When he married her, he obviously was in the household and got to know the Prophet so well. And if you guys remember the story, his dad finally finds him because he was a servant and told him, do you want to come back to me? And he chose to live with the Prophet. Be like, no, Dad, I'm good. I'd rather live with the messenger of Allah, right? Which is an amazing statement to make, right? And so the Prophet sends makes him the leader of this army. But then he says that if he somehow ends up getting killed or martyred, then Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anh, may Allah be pleased with him, will be the next commander. And if he is martyred, then Abdullah ibn Rawaha, radiallahu anh, may Allah be pleased with him, will be the next leader. Now, if you notice something here, like, hold on, why is the Prophet saying that this leader will take over this leader, will take over that leader? You've never seen that done before. And obviously, there's like, if you think about it, there might be a hint to it that, you're going against the Roman Empire. They might be a really bad battle, very, very tough battle. So let me just make it clear who takes over. And it also could be an indication that these individuals might be martyred, might be killed, right? So there's something to mention here. A little point about Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anh. Those who have been attending this course or these sessions with me for the past, 14 weeks or so now, know that he was the main spokesperson of the Muslims when they migrated from Mecca to Abyssinia, to Ethiopia. And he's the one that gave that famous speech to the Ethiopian king, the Najashi, okay? And he finally, and that happened around the 4th, 5th year in Mecca, after the Prophet was a prophet. We're in year 8 after Hijrah. So it's almost, you could say, you almost say 15 years have passed, and Ja'far finally comes back from Ethiopia to Medina. He hasn't seen the Prophet in 15 years. Okay. And the Prophet finally sent and said, come back into Medina now. And he comes back. Okay. And now the Prophet makes him a part of the second leader of this army here. Abdullah ibn Rawaha is also a famous poet of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now he's also a military leader here. So these are some of the people that, you should kind of remember their names. You hear it after a time, and inshallah you'll get to know them very well. So the Byzantine Empire, remember, they're friends with the Ghassan tribe. And they say, you know what? We're good friends with you. And the Muslims are sending an army. Well, guess what? We're going to support you with 100,000 soldiers. Okay, that number is is mind-blowing. 100,000 soldiers, right? That's like the Muslims will gather everybody in Medina, even together the rocks in Medina, they won't get 100,000, right? You know, just been a little extravagant here. I mean, I'm assuming there's a lot of rocks in Medina, but anyhow, that it's just a large number. Like you never seen 100,000 member army. And the one thing, Heraclius, who was a Caesar at that time, was a leader of the Byzantine Empire. He had unfortunately we never got to this, but when he received the letter from the Prophet ﷺ, calling to Islam, he had a very interesting conversation with Abu Sufyan of the Quraysh, and he was in the Roman Empire at that time doing trade, and he asked him, "Who is this person? Do you know him?" And Abu Sufyan said, "Yes, he's from our tribe. This guy's causing a bunch of issues, and he believes he's a prophet." But at the end, Heraclius, after speaking to Abu Sufyan, he kind of understood that, you know what, he might be a true prophet, right? The way that he spoke, if you read the hadith in Bukhari, it's in other places, that you will see that almost like he's about to become Muslim. And people in the court of Heraclius, of the Caesar, has to say, like, "Hey, what are you saying? Like, are you Muslim?" Right? And then he had to kind of like step back a little bit, right? And he said that, you know, that those who follow him are poor, those who follow him are the ones who speak against injustice. And he kind of knew that he was a prophet. And he probably knew that, you know, a prophet might come and bring down his empire. So this could mean the reason why that he sent 100,000 members or soldiers to support this Ghassan tribe. Then the Arab tribes around there came with another 100,000. This is a total of 200,000 people against the Muslim army of how many? 3,000. Okay. I don't know about you, but why do you you probably should just go back home. You probably shouldn't show up to this battle here, right? Right. That's the number. These are 50 times. Before, the most battles were 3,000 to 10,000, right? 3-1 ratio. You see this 3-1 ratio. Right now you have a 1 to 50 time ratio. Now it's just, you know, what exactly the math is there. It's you know, mind blowing. And so when the Muslims got there, and they're like, they didn't know this army was going to be that big. So some of them say, you know, we need to send a letter back to the Prophet ﷺ and tell him that, hey, this is a situation we've never seen before. Maybe we need to do some type of negotiations or something like that. But then Zayd, the leader of the armies, talks to them and say, you know, you came here either to get victory and win, or you're going to get martyrdom, right? You're going to be in Jannah, right? Sacrificing your life for the death of this person that was killed, our messenger, right? And to teach them a lesson that you can't do something like this, right? And so it's a win-win situation, right? And subhanAllah, the people say, okay, let's go, right? It could be like almost sure death, right? But subhanAllah, like I said, me and you, we would love to be there at the time of the Prophet ﷺ to see him in Mecca and Medina, right? And to see his hand and just to hear him talk and to kiss his hand, to be there as, just to see the Prophet of Allah. But at the same time, there's other things that we have to understand. If we're there at the time, you might be in this army right now. And you might be, we might be the one to say I'm going to go in the corner, right? How would you act? Inshallah, all of us will, inshallah, obviously go on and fight as hard as we can. But, it's a whole different situation. And so they go ahead and we see that every single leader was killed, just how the Prophet ﷺ kind of indicated. Zayd bin Haritha radiallahu anh, right, a beautiful companion of the Prophet ﷺ, gets martyred. Ja'far radiallahu anh, been gone 15 years, comes back, comes into the army, and is martyred, right? Obviously, like I said, it's a great reward for that, right? Obviously, I think it's a celebration actually in terms of the reward that he would get, right? And then you have Abdullah ibn Rawaha radiallahu anh, he gets martyred, right? And then the Muslims say, what are we going to do? And so Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anh, the one that was almost killed the Prophet ﷺ in the battle of Uhud, if you remember, when he came around the archers, and now he's a Muslim now, right? He became Muslim in the 7th year. We didn't really mention that, but he became Muslim in the 7th year also and accepted Islam. And so obviously he was an amazing general. And if you really study his life, oh my, he did wonders for Islam and how he helped the Muslim army in getting into the Persian and Roman empires and defeating them, and the expansion of the Muslim army by, of course, the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his grace upon him. And so they all appoint Khalid ibn Walid. Khalid ibn Walid, you're most experienced. Can you take over? What should we do? And so what he did, he engages the enemies, and he made this where some of them will go in the back and look like they're coming back up, and to show us if there had more reinforcements coming from the back, and to try to scare the Roman Empire, like, well, these Muslims have more people that are behind the mountain, behind in the back that we didn't know. And so he kept on doing that, and as they're doing that, they're moving backwards. And the Byzantine Empire, the Roman Empire, and the other Arab soldiers, the 200,000 soldiers, kind of see that, oh, the Muslims are dragging us back further. Maybe they're trying to get us in a certain area where there's an ambush. So they started worrying about themselves. And so they stopped and they said, let's hold back. And Khalid ibn Walid does an amazing thing in his strategy of war to move the Muslim army back until they're able to retreat and leave with very minimum loss. And so they only mentioned 12 people were martyred in that day. 3 of them are the Muslim leaders that we just mentioned. I have no idea how to understand that number 12. When you have 3,000 against 200,000, only 12 people are martyred. Like, subhanAllah, that's a miracle in itself, if you will. So that's what the Battle of Mu'tah was. It was a big note there that the Muslims were able to, they lost the war to extent, but it just showed the courage. And people around the Arab Peninsula were saying, how did the Muslims even show up to a battle against the Byzantine Empire? And they didn't get crushed, right? Yeah, they didn't win the war, but they must have, what are they eating, right? And so that showed that there was a big impression around the surrounding areas, and even to the Roman Empire, that, hey, these Muslims are not the normal little tribes that we have faced before. And that gave them something to note. And we're going to see later on that it's going to end up being in the next following year, another battle with the Roman Empire. And we're going to cover that next week, inshallah ta'ala. So that's the Battle of Mu'tah. We have some, lessons into that in terms of the courage of the Muslims and fighting, bravely in the face of of numbers that they had never seen before, and a big test. But we see the benefit of the moral gain that they got and the respect they got at the end. So that's that. Moving on, we go continuing with the 8th year. We have the conquest of Mecca, and this is probably the single most important event in the Muslim history. Maybe, as some scholars said, there are three main events in Muslim history that are at the top, if you will. Not the main one, the highest, most important, if you will. Number one, the revelation of the Quran to the Prophet ﷺ. Obviously, without that, we won't be talking. Okay, and that changed, the big game changer when the Quran started coming down onto this earth to the Prophet ﷺ. Number two, the Battle of Badr, because that once again was a big turning point where the Quraysh are like, who are these guys? Okay, they beat us, and that sent tremors into the Arabian Peninsula also. And then you have the conquest of Mecca, when you take over the heart, the main bus, right? The central control, process controlling center of paganism, of idol worshiping, and you change that, that's going to have effect throughout all the other areas of people who used to worship idols. And now that the worship of one God is in Mecca once again, and returning back to the times of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam. So anyhow, going to the battle, if you guys remember that one of the main lines in the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was that whoever joins the Quraysh are allowed to do that, any tribe, and anyone who joins the Muslims, any tribe that wants to join the Muslims can do so, but they have to make sure they follow the same orders of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, all the different points that are there. So as a consequence, Banu Bakr, the small tribe, joined Quraysh, and they're not super small, but they're well known, but they joined the Quraysh. Their enemies, Khuza'ah tribe, joined the Prophet ﷺ, okay, joined the Muslims, okay. And one incident happened where Banu Bakr, not caring for the provisions of the treaty, they didn't really care, they just have bitterness to the Khuza'a tribe, attacked a man in this place called Watir in the 8th year there in Sha'ban, and attacked him. And this obviously is breaking the treaty right away, because there's no fighting for 10 years. Okay. But the Quraysh messed up their part, where they also helped Banu Bakr with men and giving them weapons in the middle of the night. And the story is that they actually chased this man into Mecca, and he tried to take retreat by the Kaaba. What's understood, if you go by the Kaaba, there's no fighting, there's no killing that takes place in this holy, sanctified area. Okay. But nonetheless, the leaders of Banu Bakr went and they killed this man in there. Okay. And the word came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Banu Bakr killed a Khuza'i man in the presence of the Kaaba, right, on this night. And this is exactly what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was waiting for them to break this treaty. Just like how the Jews ended up breaking their treaty and got it kicked out of Medina. And so when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard about this, he decided to get armies ready, but he didn't want to announce it. He didn't want the word to get out. We all know Abdullah ibn Ubay, the head of the hypocrites, was sneaking out news about the Muslim army all the time. So Abu Sufyan, the leader of the Quraysh, immediately goes to Medina. They have a meeting, and the Quraysh said, just go to Medina, ask the Prophet to give us more time, give us an excuse. We didn't mean to do this, right? Now they're what? They're pleading to the Muslims now. Before they weren't doing that, right? That all they have to do now, all they can do, the only option they have is to say, I'm sorry, oh Muhammad, please give us, respite, right? And forgive us for this. And so he goes there, and he goes to his daughter's house, Habiba. Habiba is the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His own daughter is the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? It's interesting, right? That Abu Sufyan's son, think about, son-in-law is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? But it doesn't really occur to him that that he should maybe become Muslim though. But anyhow, he goes to his own daughter's house and says, "This has happened. You're the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You're my daughter. Help me out here." Habiba tells him, "You are laying down on the mat of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Get off of it, for you are dirty, right? Don't lay down on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mat." As Abu Sufyan came into their house. And when Abu Sufyan heard that, he's like, oh gosh, there's no help for my own daughter here, right? And he deserves that, obviously. And then he went to go to Abu Bakr, Umar, Ali. He went to different people, right? Also, they're from the Quraysh tribe, the same tribe he was from. So he tried to get some leverage from them. None of them helped him. And so he goes back to Mecca, and he's saying that this is pretty much over. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to come, and they're going to basically attack us because we broke the treaty. I wasn't able to renew the treaty with him. And I don't have the next points on the slides here. Unfortunately, I didn't finish my points here. So honestly, I really didn't think we were going to get this far. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my sharing. And you can just see me, inshallah ta'ala. I'm going to pull up my own notes here. So what happened is that as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as he's getting ready for the battle, and one of the things is that he didn't want people to know about it, because he didn't want people to know exactly when the Muslim army is going to be leaving. He didn't want anyone to blow it, right? And ruin this situation that they're having here. So what happened is that there was an individual whose name Hatib, and he was a Muslim, but he had family in Mecca, and he didn't have much support with the other clans in Mecca. Okay, he guess he was either his family was from outside and they lived in Mecca for a while, so it wasn't really part of the Quraysh tribe or something like this in terms of the exact relations. And so what he did, he kind of heard about the Prophet getting ready for this to invade or come into Mecca. So he wrote a note, gave it to a woman, and said, go to Mecca and give this to my family and tell them that the Muslim army is coming. Because he's thinking, like, oh my gosh, the Prophet is going to just take over Mecca. It's going to be a bloodbath. People are going to be killed left and right. There's going to be no mercy from all what they did to him. So telling his family to get out of the presence or go somewhere else and flee. And so he gave it to a woman. The woman went out, and the Prophet ﷺ was made known of this. It's understood that Angel Jibreel alayhi salam informed him that this companion of yours has sent a message to the people of Mecca. And so he's with this person, go search for it. The Prophet ﷺ tells Ali, there's a person that left this Medina, has this message, go find her and make sure you get that message back that doesn't ruin this. Ali goes back and catches up to this woman. The woman's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And she stuck the note in her hair between her braids and so forth. And Ali found it. Goes back into Medina. The Prophet ﷺ calls Hatib and says, Hatib, we found this letter, right? This is like treason, right? You're giving almost like one of the hypocrites. Like, what are you doing, right? And he says, Ya Rasulullah, I have no ill intent, right? I'm just trying. I have family in Mecca, and I'm afraid that of their faith and what might happen. So I'm just trying to make sure that they are safe. Umar in his famous statement, I always like to say, said, Ya Rasulullah, let me take off his head. Or basically, let me kill him, right, for what he has done. Okay. Treason's capital punishment to extent, right? And the Prophet ﷺ says a famous statement, says, Oh Omar, Hatib is one of those who fought in the battle of Badr. They call it Badri, someone who fought in the battle of Badr. Maybe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him, right? Meaning that, and this is something interesting, that the people who fought in the battle of Badr, it seemed that they had a different type of rank, which is understood. I kind of went over how significant that battle was. And so they were little bit more, have more mercy from the Prophet ﷺ, inshallah ta'ala subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ gives him his mercy and lets him be, and he gets the army ready of 10,000 soldiers. Okay, not 100,000 like the Roman army, but 10,000 people, right? The Prophet ﷺ musters up. And in the month of Ramadan, right, fasting's going on, but the show still has to continue. He leaves Medina, everyone is fasting, and then he goes out, and when they get to a certain point, then they all break their fast, as they are now travelers, and they continue on to Mecca. Okay. As they get to a certain point into Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ lays siege. He lets out, not really lays siege, sorry, he sets up his army. And Abu Sufyan comes. And he knows that they're coming. And he's telling them, like, you know what, Ya Rasulullah, he's trying to ask for what? For some type of course, mercy once again. And he's advised by other people to just accept the religion of Islam, right? Just become Muslim. He's a true prophet. Can't you see about anything like this? It's not clear to you, right? And so Abu Sufyan goes back. He ponders on this, right? And then he finally goes up and he accepts Islam. Okay. The leader, one of the main leaders of the Quraysh now, of the Quraysh army, the general, commander-in-chief, it now has become Muslim. And you might say, hold on, that's like wishy-washy Islam. Like, yeah, it's just like, he's only doing that to save his own people. Well, this happens a lot of times where people just become Muslim, and it might be because they're trying to save their butts, if you will, right? But Allah, the Prophet ﷺ tells the Muslims to what? Judge people what's in their heart. I mean, judge people what you hear on the outside. What's in their heart, we cannot see. We cannot look in there and say, hell, is he really, what's his true intention? But what people say on their tongue, say, Ashhadu la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu Muhammad Rasulullah, alhamdulillah. They might not be a true believer in the highest state of Iman, but they're your brother in Islam right now. Okay. Yeah, you could be kind of timid with them and find out, hold on, let's make sure that they're not going to attack me or something, but you treat them as that. And so the Prophet ﷺ accepts his Islam and knew that Abu Sufyan is a person of pride and honor, right? So the Prophet ﷺ says, make a statement out to the people of Mecca that whoever goes in the house of Abu Sufyan, they will be safe. And whoever gathers in front of the Kaaba, they will be safe. Nothing will harm them, right? We're not going to kill any of them, right? This is the Prophet ﷺ. He's going into his hometown where the Kaaba is. He doesn't want a bloodbath there. He understands this, the sanctity of that land and that area, right? As the Prophet ﷺ will say in a hadith later on, that Mecca is a haram. Okay, that's why when you go make Umrah or Hajj, they call it the haram, right? Haram comes from the word haram. I kind of explained this before in previous sessions. That means that it's haram. They call it haram from the word haram because it's haram to do things that usually are halal in those areas. You can't hunt. You can't chop a tree down, right? You know, you can't do things that you would maybe do in other places, right? You can't harm others. Whoever enters it is safe, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran. Aminan, yani they are safe, right? That you can't go and just break out in a fight and start fighting somebody, right? Even though if they did wrong to you, you have to either get out of that area or go to the authorities and handle it, right? Nothing should be done in this area. It's something that's like, you know, like a library. When you walk into a library, you don't want to go start talking loud and just eating, you know, potato chips and put your foot on the table. It's an area of like knowledge and people are studying. You just don't raise your voice. You're very quiet, right? But obviously much more than a library. This is almost like that. It's understood you don't do things like that. And you'll see the Prophet ﷺ said that there's no fighting that's done in Mecca, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gave me permission only for these few hours to have this conquest of Mecca, to go into the city, and if there's flare-ups, to take care of it, right? And have some type of fighting allowed. But usually that's not what the case is. So the Prophet ﷺ makes a statement and lets everyone know that if you want to be safe, go to the Kaaba or go to Abu Sufyan's house. Right? Abu Sufyan doesn't have like a mansion. Not many people are going to fit in his house. But it's just a notion that he's a man of honor. He's a leader. You still have to kind of give him that. Even now he's a Muslim now. Or people just don't really feel that they're respected. And this is a big lesson when people become Muslim. And if they're from a certain status, right? Certain status or certain background. And if you don't give them that same same treatment, then they might feel something in their heart. So the Prophet with his wisdom knows that obviously he's a leader. Leaders are respected. He probably his whole life has been respected. We can't just treat him like anyone else, right? So the Prophet obviously indicates the people's emotional states and their psychological states, which is something just to think about. Obviously, we don't really think about when someone takes Shahada. Where do they come from? What's their background? What they're used to that we could maybe, accommodate to them, right? And so anyhow, so here the Prophet ﷺ on the 17th of Ramadan, on the 17th of Ramadan, the Muslim army invades into Mecca. And the Prophet ﷺ did a thing where he didn't want any fighting to happen, obviously, like I mentioned. So the night before, he told all the people in their camps, or the Muslim army camp, to set multiple fires up at nighttime. Usually if you see a fire out there, it's probably like just maybe 5-10 people. Another fire, maybe another 5-20 people are gathered around. But if you go at nighttime, you see many fires look like there's a large army. So the Prophet said did that purposely to tell people that, look, there's a large army coming. Just surrender. Like the Prophet doesn't want people to fight. Okay. And so the Prophet goes in. I know I have about a minute or so remaining, right? And there's only small skirmishes that break out. Okay. Small amounts of little fighting. Most people are not doing anything. Right? They know the end has come. They've probably seen this coming from the start of the Battle of Badr and all that has taken place, right? And the Prophet ﷺ marches in to the to the Kaaba itself, stands there, right, and starts reciting certain words of the Quran, right, and also telling people that they are forgiven today, right? Remember, this is much different than the Battle of Badr when the prisoner of war were taken. If you guys remember, I spoke about this. When they got the prisoners of war in the Battle of Badr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said you should have killed your prisoners. It's a different state now. You're a small army. Now he comes into Mecca. He has a whole city under his control. You all are free. And you're going to see there's small exceptions to this. There's some people that are brought to the Prophet ﷺ and he has them killed. But for certain reasons, they were known because they did a murder in the past and they were never caught. And now they got caught. So it's only justice to that family and the person that was killed that be taken in place, because that's out of his hands. That's something that was done to another person. And then he also did certain people that were poets that were spreading rumors, right, like media about the Muslims and so forth, and had them killed. It was like only around 4 or 5 or 6 people that were actually named by name to be to go find them, and they were executed from what they used to do. But otherwise, a whole entire city was saved, which is a big difference than we see in modern day warfare now, when people go into Iraq and when people want to get into Afghanistan, as our own armies did, right? And how that changed the whole country, and things are just demolished and bombed, and innocent houses are just blown up, right? The Prophet ﷺ goes into a large city and very few people. He takes it over, and only a few people, a handful of people, 10 or 15 or so we're going to see, are killed, which is amazing, right? That how do you take over a large metropolitan type city like Mecca, and you do it in a way where the numbers are so small and you still take control of the whole city. And so, since my time is up, inshallah, we'll continue this, because I haven't finished the whole conquest of Mecca. There's more stories about the conquest of Mecca after the conquest happens than it actually does during the conquest. There's really not much fighting to talk about at all, right? There's no really skirmishes or mention. It's more talking about afterwards, the people the Prophet met, the people that came to the Prophet and explained that they want to become Muslim, right? The breaking of the idols and cleaning up the Kaaba and all that different stuff. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll speak about next week. So we're trying to finish everything next week. I might urge everyone if they could come at 10:30 next week and 15 minutes earlier. And so that 15 minutes might help me a lot in squeezing everything in, so we're not too rushed. Because when you speak about the death of the Prophet ﷺ, you don't want to do that in a hasty manner. That deserves proper time and proper explanation and respect from for the Prophet ﷺ, that we do that in a way that explains the situation, does gives due respect to that situation, which is very emotional and very hard to talk and explain about. So inshallah, may Allah subhanahu bless all of you. I hope you guys all benefited. I know that during these times, you guys all heard that we're going on this lockdown up to May 15th now, and so, which is most of Ramadan. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uplift your iman and your emotions and your taqwa and keep you safe and healthy during these times, and inshallah keep on benefiting. This happening for a reason. And so inshallah ta'ala that we surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan. Allah, you're in control, you're a Hakim, you're the most wise, you have the best purpose of why you're doing this for, and we believe in you 100%, and we're not upset with your plan, but we are, inshallah, we ask Allah to give us patience to understand it and to get through it, inshallah ta'ala. At the end, we will make dua. We ask Allah subhanahu ya kareem ya rabbil alameen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to send peace and blessing on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and his family and his wives and his companions and his followers until the day of judgment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to forgive us for our wrongdoing, Ya Rahman Ya Rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wash away our sins, Ya Rahman Ya Rahim. Increase our iman and our taqwa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, help us follow in the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this class that we are participating in, put it on our scales of good deeds on Yawm al-Qiyamah, on the day of judgment, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and purify our intentions for only your sake. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, help us return back to our masajid and appreciate your house, Ya Rahman Ya Rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bless us in reaching the month of Ramadan and taking full advantage of it, Ya Kareem Ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you. I really missed seeing you guys' faces. MashaAllah, like I said, that was my best part of my class, is seeing all of you. I could still see brother Johan and sitting right in front of me, and sister Eliza at the left side, and brother Mustafa in the back, and brother Kabir and sister Aisha in the corner, and sister Shireen and her mother in the front row. So I have that visual picture there, mashallah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you, Brother Abdul Wahab, Brother Tawfiq, Uncle Tawfiq. May Allah bless all of you, Brother Victor, Brother Nisar, all of you, inshallah ta'ala, that are attending. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll see you next week. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.